Welcome to the Spool Podcast. Unwind with Dr. Nils Roemer, Dean of the Bass School at UT Dallas.
Are you ready to go?
I'm ready. Question is, are you?
All right. You know what I learned this season on your show? I learned that you could really handle any situation. Now, this is my rare compliment I'm giving you.
I thought that's a challenge with which you start. And now, today, you're going to break that record.
No. I was very impressed how you, no matter what was thrown at you, you just picked it up with charm and grace and intelligence, but enough about the compliments.
No, this was good. I mean, we rehearsed this opening about 10 times for him to get the compliment right. And this version was good,
It was a good version.
It was good. That's good.
So we'll
stick with this one.
We'll keep that one in there.
We'll keep this one. All right.
And you always put things into a historical context, too, that I like,
Thank you. So, that's an interesting one because by training, I'm a historian.
Right.
And, one of the things that you recognize when you study that, we say they're disciplines. And what that means is really that your mind gets disciplined to think in a particular way. So most things that come our way, yes, I'll put them into historical context and try to make sense out of that almost by default.
Good, because then there's a lot here that I want to talk
let's
to you
go
about
with
that you could explain. All right, so, you had Professor Mitchell from the University of Chicago on the show. And you guys were having a very interesting discussion on gaming and kids now playing games. It's very different than when I played Monopoly as a kid. Nobody cared.
Did you win?
Of course, I cheated. But that you talked about how it's changing social structure, the gaming. What is going on? So,
it's an interesting one. I think with lots of those, issues like gaming, online, and, our world online versus in person, we think about everything in these binaries, right? Everything is like, reality, virtual reality, in person, removed or remote, and so on and so forth. Old board games, Monopoly versus. What I think was interesting with all the technology, and we lose sight of it, that they find it's technology that ultimately is driving our human interaction. It's not technology outside of our human interaction. And I think that's very true for games. I mean, there's very much the sense that games, for the individuals who don't want to interact with anybody and just want to be at home and on their couch and endlessly play. Adrian, I'm not looking at you, okay? But we can edit this out.
No, we're not editing that out. That needs to stay in.
But I think, what we forget is in particular the way the kids are playing. They're playing their games. They have their social WhatsApp or whatever channel open, and they'll talk and they connect. I see this with my children. They're now young adults. Right. Let's go back here. They are dispersed now. Some are in Texas, some are outside, but they get together with their high school friends at night and play. But it's social interaction. It's community.
But they're all in different locations.
But they're all in different locations. But what they're striving or craving for is like their connectedness.
Right.
And so their technology facilitates that instead of it being something that removes it from it. Now, to be sure, the good old days, there was something really tactile around Monopoly, right? It was good because when you had that losing streak, you could always find a way to throw the dice in a way that messed up the entire board and then redo it, right? That was probably what you did, right?
Sure.
And, there was the sound that came along with it, and all of that was part of the moving around bits, the kind of connectivity. But today's games, not all of them equally, but I think they often are trying to serve similar kind of, cravings for connectedness.
But is it good that they don't go out together socially? They just, I'm here, you're there, let's play a game.
I think it's not an either or. I think, just because you and I don't necessarily play the games, we don't quite see how this all connects in their worlds. That They do see each other socially, they do go out, but, it's also a generation that, in lots of ways for whom the pandemic was a very formative experience.
Right.
And that experience with the pandemic coincided with us leaping into new technologies just as much as we did on campus. I mean, did you know anything about Zoom or Teams in 2019?
Well, of course not. But now it's our life, though.
But now it's our life, know. And so I think all of us have been, brought into this under very, particular circumstances in which isolation and being removed from everyone was also part of it. But it doesn't mean that was not the fault of technology. That was what the pandemic did. And so
Right.
I think, coming back to, Professor Mitchell and others, or maybe to our school, the arts, humanities, technology, the question is, how do you find the humanities inside of technology, how we're
Right.
working with it? Not that we are here and they're there. It's not that, there's a human intelligence and here's artificial intelligence. There's only one way how we kind of intertwine with all of that.
Well, and you're talking about that. Let's talk about AI for a minute. You and I discussed it on a show. You discussed it with Professor Mitchell on a
Right.
show. But the one that really rung my bell, so to speak, was Dr. Hanson.
Oh yeah, he was.
Well, he's a UTD
Yeah.
grad.
Right.
And when he said that he is writing the code for the AI brain for the robots that his company builds, the first thing that runs through your head is, well, that could be a little bit creepy. But then the next thing that goes through your head is you go, I think I want a robot. What's going to be happening with this? Are we all going to have robots one day?
I think we will of some sorts. I mean, whether they have the physical, appearance of a human that looks like a robot, or whether they actually don't require that any longer, whether there are these little things that are flying around or not, I think we'll figure this out. But I think, as of now, I mean, you're a good example. You're
Thank
sitting,
you.
you're sitting in front of me. Why? Thanks to AI that allowed you to find this location and help you with the map, because God knows where you would have ended up today. So
Yeah.
in what I'm trying to say is that technology is already so embedded in
Right.
us. What David was talking so passionately about, which I thought was really,
Well, he was fascinating.
oh, he was incredible. But what I really, really took from it is that to him, the question about AI is not about artificial intelligence, but it's really about our humanity.
Right.
And so the way he thought about it, I thought was that we are actually the creators of AI.
Right.
And so if we kind of dehumanize this as something being, the sort that it's just there as a tool that is executing certain things, then that will become a technology that in that way will also impact our own humanity. If, however, we design it as a technology that is more humanized of sorts and helps us also with our own humanity, then that will shape us in a different way. In other words, it's for us to create the technology that serves us and our purposes, and
Right.
not to create something that ultimately is so alien to us that you just always want to, like you do sometimes with these phones, that you just want to throw them against the wall and say, they're haunting me, they're ringing, they're reminding me I don't want them around. So I think that's the interesting one, that, when we think about AI, we think about sometimes as a tool that we can look up things, but we need to think about more as a partner, as a friend, someone we talk to.
And we all use AI, in the office, on the
Right.
computers, at home, and whatnot. And you do find yourself talking to AI like it's a person.
Yeah, But I also talk to my dog, and and then sometimes even to my cat. I mean,
and possibly your kids occasionally.
and I get a lot of agreement from the dogs and the cats. Less from the kids.
That's right.
So this is AI has that possibility as well, that you can have these effortless conversations that can be really very assuring of sorts.
Well,
but
now-
there are more increasingly, in particular with ChatGPT-5 was just released on Thursday. They have, even earlier that function built in that you can really talk to, and you can design, figure out the voice.
Right.
I can, if I'm a little nostalgic, I can pick a German voice. I mean, it's like that system, whether I switch into German, English, it's all the same, and
Yeah.
can have a voice that reminds me more of a voice that is more akin to the dialect that you speak in the north of Germany,
Yeah.
and then I can go all Texan down here with another voice and,
That's right.
and be like, oh, this is the best of all possible worlds.
Yeah. No. All right. So now let's go a little bit back.
Aha.
To people here. Tim Cloward was on your show.
Yes.
He wrote the book, The City That Killed the President, talking about Kennedy.
Right.
In Dallas, obviously. But, and there's so many conspiracy theories about the Kennedy assassination. And you know this about me. My company has talked to over 1,000 people that were alive and could remember where they were when Kennedy was shot. But these are people that said they were 18 when they were 17, so they could join the Army in World War II, get in early. They grew up in the Great Depression, talked about being hungry, talked about being POWs. They lived through everything from that time forward. The moon landing in '69 for the first time. You know, they saw that. The tragedy of all the assassinations and the rioting in the 60s. 9/11, they would
The
talk.
good music of the 1960s.
Well, that,
you know?
we talked about
Yeah.
that. But then they talked about their family that lived in New York on 9/11.
Right.
And when I would ask them, and we're talking about 1,000 people, when I would ask them the question, what is the one occasion in their lifetime that they know exactly where they were the moment that it happened, 98% of them said the JFK assassination. Why?
Well, I think there are a number of these historical events in the 20th century where, at times everyone would have had a clear sense of where they were when that happened. I mean, the very first, event that is kind of global in the way in which it is followed is probably the sinking of the Titanic.
Right.
Because of the cable. So it's live, that information is available in New York and Paris. So it's a global in that respect. And the news articles and the next day in the New York Times and in Le Monde, they're all, drawing on the same information. And, you move forward and you see the liberation of, let's say, Paris or something in 1945. And again, it's something that would have been globally observed. But various generations will have some historical event that is of that great significance because they perceive it to be a watershed that rewrites their own lives into before and after, and also one that they themselves, not only, but their families, their friends, everyone observe together. So it becomes very quickly a collective marker. It's not just their lives have changed in the before and after, but everybody's life.
But will the importance of it go down when that generation is completely gone?
Well, first of all, a couple of things. Underlying this is a kind of generational model, right? You started out with this being a group that was born young enough to have served in the Second World War. So this is a group probably born just in the middle or tail end of the First World War.
Right.
So they have a certain kind of experimental, kind of experiences in the immediate aftermath, rebuilding of lives. So there are many things that bind them together. One of the things is also what that generation, is known for is, after 45, unprecedented stability and growth and social upward mobility. So JFK became a kind of shattering of that sense of stability for many, I would say, and therefore became this wound of sorts that, you could say when we had him here, I mean, the fact that he wrote this book is an indicative. I mean, that's is still alive. And, and the lives also in the ways in which it has shaped probably subsequent politics and generations, that it's like with us in many ways still.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to one of our favorite guests that you had on the show. Usman Riaz.
Oh my God. Talking about a multi-talented, individual. Unbelievable. And then, I thought we were already lucky, we're lucky when he talked about the process of putting the Glassworker together, this movie over 10 years in Pakistan, an animation. But then when he started unpacking that, it was the drawing, the music, the score, the storyboard, that he did all
of which he did.
Yeah, that he did it all. And then we thought like, okay, and he's young and no resources, and it became a bit of how magical is all of that. And then all of a sudden we said, well, okay. You said something about that this was actually your second love, and that prior to it, you were also playing guitar. I said, yeah. And remember? And then when I gave him the guitar, he went wild with that one. And you just thought, okay.
That was amazing.
That was incredible. But where you thought, okay, this young man could have gone this way, that way, or another way, but he was going. That was, incredibly talented and poised, right?
Well, he started at 23 on the movie. And it was when he was 33, 10 years later, he had worked that whole time on the film. And that's when he finally got it distributed. It was just incredible hearing that. But then when he played the guitar, I never saw a guitar played how he played it.
It was like as if you had a whole band there. It was like, the guitar, the percussion, it was was incredible.
Yeah.
You liked that, Adrian, right? Adrian was on the other side of the camera, and it was like, whoa. And, it was like, keep it going, keep it going. I mean, no, that was an incredible experience. But also, I mean, putting it into perspective, 10 years, that's a long time to believe in a dream and to kind of pursue it without having any kind of tangible signs of success. So this is like real conviction.
Yeah, most people can't do
that's
that.
It's an interesting one. Well, and then I think I don't know if as a society we value any longer, as we're really output driven. So, I'll call you and say, when are you ready for the next show of sorts? And you would have said, well, I'm working on it 10 years, come back in 10 years time. I would throw my shoe at you and say, well, what are you talking about?
Well, what's interesting, in Hollywood, somebody might write a script and it might sit on a shelf in a studio for 5-6 years, and then they get a call, we're ready to do this now. But he was actively working on it the whole time. When Hollywood will start the movie, in 6 months, it's done. That 10 years was very, very impressive, No,
very much. But, that's been part of the fun also of this podcast, getting to know exceptional individuals and learning a little bit about them and kind of being in a conversation with them. I mean, he's, maybe one of the extremes. David Hanson would be another one. But we had so many exceptional individuals on the show that it's been a tremendous joy just getting to know them and, also understanding a little bit what drives them. And
you had Anthony Dorsett on the show. Anthony Dorsett played 8 years in the NFL. But he always, I guess, kind of lived in the shadow of his father, Hall of Famer Tony Dorsett. Mm-hmm. How hard is that to do?
Well, that's an interesting one. And you started to understand that a little bit, that I guess when we look at it from the outside, we think father like son, son like father. Of course, she became an NFL player because, of course, she had a father who would have, built that love for the sport and, early on. But then you understand this is not just empowering and enabling to have a father like that, right? There's also in lots of ways something that can really weigh heavily on you. And I think in our podcast, we had this, I remember this conversation with him that I think I was trying to get at. So when did you realize? Because at some point he says, well, for me, he was for a while just my father. But then I think he describes the scene in the food court at the University of Pittsburgh. And he's there with his friend and they're munching on their burgers. And it's a scene where he's looking up and all of a sudden he realizes that the whole walls are
mausoleum to
it's
Tony.
just covered to his father. He's, right?
Yeah.
And the way he told that story, you really started to understand, well, this is not just a blessing to have a famous father and to quote unquote follow in his footsteps.
That's why I wonder
because you're always going to be measured against him.
Right.
And I think that, I think is what is good enough then? What do you have to accomplish? And then, unfortunately, his father was really, really good at it. Well, so it's not an easy one to match.
So Bob Pearson.
Yes, Bob.
Bob, you remember Bob?
Yeah, of course I remember Bob.
Bob brought up something very interesting to me. In the old days, 5 years ago, corporations would buy TV commercials and reach so many people and be negotiated based on how many people they reach. Well, today, every young kid, lady, man, they all have an Instagram account. They all have a TikTok account. They all make silly little videos, and they get one to go viral, and all of a sudden 10 million people watch them feeding their dog. And now they're an influencer, and now corporations call them to pay them to pose for a picture holding their product to put it on their Instagram account. It's opened the door for a lot of people. I mean, are they going to be ambitious to work? I mean, how do you see this changing society?
Well, there are a couple of things in that question. Once, the dissemination of technology. Two, that it's become so decentralized, right? It's not any longer produced through a major TV show or, shown through a major channel, but that in a nutshell, everyone theoretically could become the producer of sorts. But it also has created this insane kind of culture around these influences. And I think, in particular for young individuals these days at campuses, it's created also this very strong, aspiration. So I don't know how many followers you have on your Instagram account.
Well, not
but I
many.
know how many I have, and I think being judged by those things, it can also be really, really challenging and not just an easy kind of empowering thing, because most individuals, whether they feed their dogs or otherwise, don't necessarily end up as influencers with huge 1 million or 10 million followers, but it becomes, a part of a new culture. And I think what's interesting, you can kind of look at this in two different ways. You can look at the dog feeding influencer or whatever, but you can also see why do people, so that's what TikTok or the technology is enabling, right? But the other part is, why do so many then become so infatuated with that? And I think in strange ways they do, because they find that influencer that has recommended something else the day before far more authentic and reliable than the old TV show or the old commercial. So there's actually that kind of connectedness that they think, by following that influencer, by feeding their dog with the same food, they're part of their friends, their followers.
Right.
And that in strange ways, that seems more real to them than the good old commercials that TV shows would have
Well,
brought.
it's interesting because we are seeing a transition in branding and marketing that's really taking place, and it's caught on. Dr. Laura Kim, she turned out
she turned out to
be my hero.
She
and
was.
let me tell you why. I've been fighting with this guy since the beginning that I want to keep your humor in there because you've got such a great sense of humor, and he wanted it to be more professional.
The serious stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And we had this
Adrian,
argument.
do you want to speak to the need to be serious,
Hey, I'm just trying to keep it clean.
Keep it clean.
We went back and
forth. He was
forth.
worried about you the whole time.
Yeah, we went back and forth, and he won, and then Laura Kim came in and saved the day. When she said during the middle of the podcast, wouldn't it be neat if the two of us were, meaning you and her, sitting in the auditorium here, waving to us up on the stage? And we did it, and it was hysterical, and Adrian loved it.
Did you?
And Adrian loved it. So we got to that next step, and then it went completely great, because you looked at him one day off camera while we were doing the show, and you started talking to him, and he goes, "Okay, I'm in."
No, he's part of it. No, I mean, Laura was just fun. I mean,
a performance
artist, incredibly smart, so many good and interesting things to say, but all kind of lighthearted, and it was really, I mean, all of these podcasts have been in a way, with really easy, because the people that were invited were quite chatty.
You made them easy, and I'll tell you why you made them easy. Because they felt very comfortable with you, and they felt they could talk to you.
You talk about my role, but I think it's also, you can look at it from the other perspective, how much each one of the individuals that we interviewed changed also a little bit the podcast, or changed how. I remember last time I was adding on probably 4 or 5 pounds here, because I was devouring all these delicious things that donuts that we had in here, right?
Let me bring up Jinny Cho.
You've gone back and bought more. Let's confess. You can say it here on the camera that you've had more of those beyond. I did.
I
confess, I had more.
On camera, we had you eating plenty of them.
And I went back and had more.
I want that one, but then it was gone.
Yeah.
She is kind of an incredible story, and I wanted to get your take on it. Here's a lady who, at UTD, engineering degree.
Yeah.
And you would think she's going off into the corporate world, make good money and do great things, but instead she chose a family history of having coffee and donut shops, and she created her own and started her own. So the question is it because when you're in your 20s, you really don't know what you want to do the rest of your life? Or is maybe the answer is the key is getting a good education and then going off and figuring it out?
I think you answered that question. It is about getting a good education and getting the ability to find your way and your success, and most importantly also your happiness while at it. And I think she was a fine example of someone, yes, she studied engineering, but she was interested in donuts and coffee, because on the one side, the way she went about it created endless opportunities. I mean, she's like a weekly menu, right?
Right.
And so like of creativity and like trying out wild new things, but at the same time also it's a family business.
Yeah.
And so I think she, as a girl, had been in a donut shop with her parents, and so continuing that family tradition became really, really important.
Yeah, and the pastries, donuts are great.
Yeah.
I could see this franchising.
But that's, I think a common theme amongst quite a few of the individuals that we interviewed, that they may have been trained or educated for one thing, but then they became something entirely different thereafter. I mean, and I think that's in lots of ways the idea that you go to school, learn a trade, and then kind of have a career in that field and until your retirement at age of, I think that's maybe more something of the past. I think we see more and more people, also because our own time is changing. We talked about technology, where what is required or what will make us successful tomorrow or what will make us happy tomorrow will be different. And therefore, we can't like say, okay, this is what I learned, this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm going to continue to do. But we all do it better if we look at Adrian. I mean, he's like now a podcast producer. I mean, he looks all slick behind the camera there, and
Those white
it's not what he
headphones always
initially
get
had
me.
signed up for. It's a new thing, right?
It's a new fun adventure.
I mean, you did not sign up for to become a sports commentator, a podcast producer, and all that. You probably started out somewhere else as well, right?
Yes. Unfortunately, I started out a long time ago. But
But at last, you arrived where you always wanted to be, at this table
At
here,
this-
at this
you're
moment,
darn right.
talking about donuts and podcasts and technology.
Well, and then you have one more surprise coming up for everybody, and we'll let them wait for it. And then the second season will be a real nice surprise for everybody too.
we're really excited about the second season. So we are just sitting out here in sunny Texas. Just it's a little warm outside, but it means we're wrapping up season number 1. We produced thus far with this one, I think, a total of 23 different podcasts. There's one more to come, which will come actually with a AI. Adrian created my digital twin, and he gave it a mean-spirited German accent. God knows how that came about, instead of my clear voice. But we'll have a little bit fun with that. It'll be the AI asking me questions on the basis, actually, of all of the other podcasts. We'll see how that goes. We want to be a little playful, and then that will have wrapped up then our first season. And I think it was a wonderful journey. We started, actually, you and I, with our very first one, roughly like a year ago, right?
Yeah, 1 year ago.
Actually,
what
we
people
talked
don't
probably
know-
5 hours in order to get 20 minutes of sensible stuff out of it, and we got a lot better. We learned a lot and had a lot of different fun, and I think I'm really excited about the next year.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be great, man.
All right,
And you're going to make it great.
tune in for more. Bye-bye.